The first sign was the missing button. Not mine, his. It was lying there on the hardwood floor beneath the catering table, half crushed into a smear of goat cheese and something red. I only noticed it because I dropped my phone trying to get away from a conversation about NFT handbags. When I picked it up, the button was staring at me. Not a regular one, but the kind you only find on expensive tailored shirts. Dark charcoal. Tiny engraved Z. I didn't even have to guess whose it was. Every thread of my gut knew. I slipped it into my pocket like a thief and stood up slowly. The kind of slowly that happens when your world starts tilting and you're the only one who notices. Music echoed around the room, some ambient jazz remix garbage, and everything was bathed in this weird, warm, golden light. People were laughing, posing for pictures, sipping drinks like their lives were spotless and curated. But that stupid button burned against my thigh like a tiny, angry secret. Somewhere in that party, he was walking around, unaware that his shirt had betrayed him. That's when I looked up, across the room, and saw Delaney fixing her hair in a hallway mirror. She was smoothing something on her neck. I squinted. A smudge. A lip smudge? No. 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 I started walking. Not quickly. Just enough to keep my hands from shaking. As I passed the hors d'oeuvre table, someone said, "Aren't you Delaney's husband?" I didn't answer. By the time I reached her, she'd seen me. She smiled, too bright. Too ready. "Hey, babe. You disappeared." I didn't speak. I just held up the button. For a split second, her face broke. Not fully, just a hairline fracture in the mask. "What's that?" she asked. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because the door behind her creaked open, his voice floated out, and suddenly the room tilted all the way. He said one word. "Del?" He stepped out. Shirt slightly untucked. Collar uneven. And sure enough, the missing button. Gone. His eyes met mine, cocky, careless. Then cautious. Then, something I didn't expect. Amusement. Like he thought it was funny. And that's when I realized. This wasn't an accident. It was a challenge. He wanted me to know. He wanted me to see. And for the first time in my life, I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I smiled. Because he had no idea who he was messing with. Not yet. But he would. Soon. I didn't speak. Not right away. I just kept staring at him while my fingers curled around that button like it was a detonator. And in a way, it was. One stupid, luxurious, personalized button, the kind people like him wear without thinking twice, had unraveled something I wasn't ready to see. He didn't flinch. Not when I stepped closer. Not when I stopped just inches from him. Zeke, yeah, that's his name. Of course it is. Just smirked like I was an inconvenient side character who wandered too far into the script. He looked at me the way you'd look at a guy who brought gas station wine to a French vineyard. "Delaney?" She didn't say a word either. Just adjusted her neckline and looked down at her shoes like they suddenly had the answers. I could practically hear her weighing the situation, calculating which version of the story to go with. Her silence wasn't guilt. It was strategy. The hallway around us was quiet. Too quiet for a party supposedly in full swing. The muffled music, the echo of laughter from the gallery behind us, it all felt distant. Like this moment had broken away from reality and started forming its own orbit. "Everything okay here?" Zeke asked, finally, like he was the host checking on a guest who looked a little too pale. I didn't answer him. Instead, I turned to Delaney and asked, very softly, "How long?" She blinked. Not like she was surprised by the question, but like she was stalling. "Thada. How long?" Still, she didn't answer. Zeke jumped in, hands in his pockets, leaning slightly like he was on a balcony overlooking a fire he started. "Look, man, you're making this weird. It's just a party. Just a party." That's what he said. I almost laughed. It was perfect. Like a villain's line in a bad film. If someone had written that into a script, I'd have rolled my eyes. But standing there, I realized something terrifying. He meant it. He really thought it was just a party. He thought I was just a prop. And Delaney, she didn't stop him. I stepped forward again, just 1 inch. Enough to let him know the air was mine now. "You lost something," I said and slowly pulled the button from my pocket. I held it out between us like an accusation wrapped in wool. He glanced at it, then down at his shirt, and gave the smallest shrug. "Taylor'll fix it." That was it. No denial. No pretending. No fear. I'd never felt so invisible in my life. And maybe that's why I did it. I didn't hit him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just did the thing he never expected me to do. I smiled. Then I turned to Delaney and whispered, "Check your clutch." She frowned. What? Go ahead, I said, louder now. Check your clutch. Confused, she reached into her little gold clutch purse and froze. Because it wasn't empty. Inside, she found a flash drive. A cheap little thing with red tape on the end. The one she thought I'd lost a year ago when my laptop crashed. But I hadn't lost it. I'd hidden it. And last week, I finally plugged it in, just to see what was still on it. Emails. Voice notes. Screenshots. From her. From him. From their little inner circle of smug office hyenas. It was all there. Not just proof of cheating, but how they laughed about it. How they joked about me. About how easy it was. About how Thad's just too sweet to notice. About how I'd make a great divorce story someday. I wasn't supposed to find it. But I did. Delaney's face turned the color of snowmelt. Zeke looked at me, this time with real tension in his eyes. Like he'd finally realized he'd poked something that bites. Don't make a scene, she whispered, gripping my arm. Please. Not here. And that's when I knew I'd won the first round. Because they weren't worried about what they did. They were worried about how I'd look telling people about it. They were worried about optics. So I smiled again, stepped back, and said loud enough for the guests nearby to hear. Thanks for the party. I think we're done here. I didn't look back as I walked toward the front doors of the gallery. My heart was hammering. My head was a mess. But my spine, for the first time in months, felt like it was finally standing up on its own. And that was just the beginning. Because Zeke thought this was about ego. He had no idea what I was really planning. I didn't go home that night. I walked out of the gallery, button in one pocket, phone in the other, and just kept walking. Past parked Teslas and Ubers idling at the curb. Past the valet who asked if I needed my car. I didn't answer. I just nodded like a man who still owned his own direction, even if everything else had been stolen out from under him. My legs carried me across the city like I had somewhere to be. I didn't. Not really. But I needed space, a kind of space that couldn't be filled with apologies or lies or the smell of someone else's cologne still clinging to my wife's skin. Eventually, I ended up in the only place I knew would be empty at that hour, the copy room at the back of my office. Yeah, I know. Pathetic. Most guys in this situation would have gone to a friend's place, or maybe a hotel, or a bar to drown in some whiskey fantasy. But not me. I went to the one place no one ever bothers checking after 9 p.m. A place where I could sit under flickering fluorescent lights and listen to the hum of a forgotten printer while my marriage unraveled in my head. I sat on the floor, back against the cabinets, and pulled out the flash drive again. Just holding it made my stomach clench. I'd only skimmed it before. Just enough to realize what it was. Just enough to know I wasn't crazy. But now, I had time. Now, I listened. The audio recordings were the worst. They weren't just intimate. They were cruel. Casual. Like two coworkers making fun of a mutual friend. Only that friend was me. I sat there and listened to my wife, my Delaney, mock me. She called me predictable. Soft. She joked about the way I tried to surprise her with dinner once and burned the risotto. Zeke laughed and called me Mr. Beige. Said he didn't know guys like me still existed. And then there was a pause, a long one, before Delaney added, sometimes I wonder if I married him because I knew he'd never leave me. He's safe. But safety gets boring. I don't remember when I started crying. The room blurred. The audio continued. And I just sat there, the tears mixing with some pathetic little chuckle. Because hearing it out loud made it so obvious. Like watching a magician explain a trick you should have figured out years ago. But here's the thing. I didn't cry because of what she said. I cried because I knew she was right. I was safe. I was predictable. I bent. I compromised. I stayed quiet. I said yes more often than I should have, not because I was weak, but because I thought that's what love required. I thought I was protecting something. But in reality, I was just giving her more room to erase me. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her again. I wasn't going to plead, or accuse, or ask why like some heartbroken schoolboy. No. I was going to document everything. Because Zeke may have been cocky, but he wasn't smart. And Delaney? She was careful, but she was still arrogant. They thought I was just a harmless, spineless husband. The kind who'd cry into his cereal and eventually forgive everything after a few months of therapy and hollow promises. But I'm not that man anymore. They showed me who they really were. So I'm going to show everyone else. And I know exactly where to start. Because Zeke's about to host a private client showcase in 3 days, a huge event for investors and brand partners. Delaney will be there too, standing by his side like a trophy he stole from a museum he didn't even respect. And I've just been invited. Not officially, of course. But that's the best part. They won't see me coming. And when the lights go down and the slideshow begins, and all eyes are on that massive projection screen, they'll learn something important. I spent the next 2 days inside my own version of war prep. There were no weapons, no shouting, no threats, just quiet, obsessive planning. The kind that keeps you up at night, eyes fixed on the ceiling, rehearsing every possible outcome while your heart whispers, what if none of this works? I didn't go home. I didn't check in. I didn't answer Delaney's texts, which started around 2 a.m. the morning after the party and became more frantic as the hours passed. At first it was, "Thad, where are you?" Then, "We need to talk. This isn't what you think." And eventually, "If you embarrass me at work, I swear to God." There it was. Not, "I love you." Not, "I'm sorry." But a warning. A desperate attempt to control the narrative before I could touch it. It's strange. I used to feel paralyzed in the face of conflict. I'd avoid it, freeze, convince myself it wasn't worth pushing. But now, I wasn't frozen. I was calculating. Every movement I made was deliberate. Because the truth is, I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning reveal. Zeke's event was being held at this upscale co-working venue downtown. The kind of place where startup CEOs in turtlenecks pitch empty ideas to rich men in loafers. A brand experience evening, they called it. Industry guests, product demos, champagne fountains, influencer live streams. You get the picture. I managed to get on the guest list by impersonating someone I knew would be there. A minor investor from Phoenix, Grant something. He was one of those guys who RSVP'd to everything and showed up to nothing. One phone call, a little email spoofing, and just like that, I had a spot, a name tag, and a lanyard. They never even asked for ID. Because in Zeke's world, details were just decoration. What they didn't know was that I'd also made a second account on the event's back-end presentation system. It wasn't hard. Zeke used the same passcode for everything. I'd seen it in one of the leaked screenshots. For digits. His birthday. The kind of arrogance only someone untouchable thinks they can afford. I uploaded my version of the keynote. It looked identical to the original. Same opening title, same elegant design, but slide 6? Slide 6 held the truth. Photos. Emails. A short video clip, timestamped. Not graphic. Not vulgar. Just enough to break the illusion. Just enough to make the audience stop sipping their champagne and see. That morning, before the event, I did something else too. I went home. Delaney was there. She opened the door in a robe I'd never seen before, probably his. Her eyes were puffy, hair a mess, mascara smudged like war paint. She looked relieved when she saw me. "Thank God," she whispered, stepping forward to hug me. I didn't move. She stopped. I didn't know you'd be coming back." "I'm not," I said. "I just needed something." She stepped aside, unsure. "What?" I walked past her, into the bedroom, opened the drawer where I kept my journals. I found the one I needed. Red leather cover. Full of all the moments she thought I'd forgotten. The cracks I'd written down instead of confronting. The comments I'd swallowed. The nights she didn't come home because she was at work. She watched me with a mix of confusion and fear. "What are you doing with that?" I zipped it into my bag and turned to her. "Just making sure I don't rewrite history to protect your version of it." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I walked to the door, then paused. "You should probably leave before tonight," I said, quiet. "Or don't. Just don't act surprised." And then I left. The venue was already buzzing when I arrived. Music pulsed through the walls, some indie electronic beat curated to feel expensive. People in tailored suits milled about, sipping drinks and pretending to care about one another's startups. I stayed near the back, a ghost in a room full of avatars. Zeke took the stage right on schedule. He had the mic clipped to his collar, one hand casually gripping a glass of bourbon like he'd been born with it. Delaney stood off to the side, flawless, cold, ready to beam on cue. He welcomed everyone with that smarmy confidence only men like him could master. Slide 1. Applause. Slide 2. A quote about innovation. Slide 3. A bloated graphic of market dominance. Slide 4. Applause again. Slide 5. Then, slide 6. There was no applause this time. Just stillness. Then murmurs. Then phones raised. Eyes widened. Delaney turned her head just slowly enough for me to see the exact moment her jaw locked in place. Zeke faltered. Took a step forward. Looked at the screen like it had betrayed him personally. The room began to shift. People whispered. Investors glanced at one another. Someone in the front row muttered, "Is this real?" I slipped out before anyone could look for who'd done it. Didn't need to see the explosion to know the fuse had burned all the way down. Back in the alley, I finally allowed myself to breathe. My phone buzzed again and again, but I didn't check it. It was done. The curtain had lifted. I didn't go home that night either. I couldn't. It wasn't about safety or fear anymore. It was about space. I needed distance from the rubble I'd just set fire to. I knew once the fire spread, it would consume everything: reputations, jobs, the illusion of our marriage, and maybe even whatever was left of me. So, I found myself in the only place that ever felt immune to time and consequence, the city bus terminal. It's ironic. All those years I spent making sure Delaney didn't feel bored, booking small weekend getaways, cooking terrible surprise meals, pretending I enjoyed hiking. And yet the only place I felt truly calm was sitting in a cracked plastic chair beneath a flickering fluorescent light, surrounded by the scent of engine oil and cold vending machine sandwiches. No expectations here. No pretending. Just people running away from something or heading towards something they hadn't figured out yet. I was somewhere in between. My phone vibrated in my pocket, buzzing in angry little spasms. I let it sit. I didn't want to look yet. I knew what I'd find: half-baked apologies, furious threats, maybe even a carefully worded PR draft from Zeke, trying to twist what happened into a hack or a malicious breach. But they couldn't control this story anymore. The narrative didn't belong to them. Not after what I released. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I pulled the phone out and saw nearly 60 missed messages. But it was the email notifications that made me pause. Subject: contract suspended. Subject: immediate internal review. Subject: your statement is required by end of day. Zeke's empire was crumbling faster than I expected. Turns out, one of the recordings I had included a casual but damning mention of client data manipulation, an inside joke that involved faking campaign engagement reports for a fashion line launch. I hadn't even realized how serious that part was until a few guests from the showcase apparently did. That was the beauty of truth. Once it was out, it had a way of dragging other skeletons out of closets no one expected to open. Around 3 a.m., I got a message I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't from Delaney or Zeke. It was from Zeke's wife. Her name was Emery, which I only knew from an HR doc I'd glimpsed on one of Delaney's emails months ago. I didn't know anything about her. I had pictured someone glamorous, icy, emotionally armored like a CEO's wife always seems to be. But the message she sent shattered that image instantly. "I don't know who you are, but thank you. I've suspected something for a while." The audio. I heard his voice. "I just needed confirmation. If you ever want to talk or testify, I'd appreciate it." Testify. That word clung to my mind like a cold wind. I hadn't even thought of legal consequences. I wasn't out for lawsuits or depositions. I just wanted the mask to come off. But now I realized I might have opened a door that wouldn't shut quietly. Still, her message gave me something unexpected, a strange sense of solidarity. Two people who didn't know each other, both lied to by the same performers, both trying to make sense of their lives now that the script had been ripped in half. I replied with one sentence: "You deserve the full truth. I'll send everything." By sunrise, I had. Every file, every screenshot, every timestamped note. She responded with a thank you and nothing more. And Delaney? She finally called. Not a message. Not a voice note. An actual call. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. When I did, the first thing I heard was silence. Then her voice, tight, clipped, controlled. "Do you feel better now?" I exhaled through my nose. "No," I said. "Not even a little." There was a pause. "You humiliated me." "No," I corrected. "You humiliated yourself." I just turned on the lights. She let out a bitter little laugh. "You could have just asked for a divorce. And you could have just told me the truth 2 years ago instead of letting me sleep beside a stranger." Another silence. Heavier this time. "I want to fix this," she said suddenly, her tone lowering. "We've both made mistakes. Both." That word hit harder than anything else. I almost laughed. "What exactly is my mistake, Delaney? Loving you too quietly? Trusting you too long? You planned this," she snapped. "You waited for the perfect moment to ruin everything." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "No, I didn't ruin anything. You built your whole world on quicksand. I just stopped pretending I didn't feel it sinking." She hung up. I expected that. But what I didn't expect was the strange mix of grief and relief that came next. The end wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It was a slow, sharp exhale. The kind you release after holding your breath for years. As I sat there watching buses roll in and out under gray skies, I realized something important. It wasn't about punishing them anymore. It was about reclaiming me. By the second day, I was everywhere. Not my face, not my name. I'd been careful about that. But the story, the leaks, the footage, screenshots of Zeke's presentation slide were all over social media. Comments flooding in. The internet, I realized, didn't care about the truth. It cared about spectacle. And Zeke had given them just enough. Someone created a meme using his smug face from the event and captioned it, "Innovation? More like infidelity." That one made me laugh harder than I should have. But what stuck with me more was how quickly the press latched on to the scandal. Business blogs, gossip forums. Even one fashion magazine ran a side column about toxic leadership in the age of brand aesthetics. He had become the very thing he tried to bury me as, a joke. And Delaney? She tried calling again. 7 times in one morning. I never picked up. Her messages were an unraveling thread. The first few were cold and blaming. The next ones, apologetic, performative. By the last one, she sounded like someone on the edge of a ledge they didn't expect to find themselves standing on. "Thad, please. I know I hurt you. I did. But this has gone too far. I'm being iced out by everyone. The board's called an emergency session. They're talking about damage control and internal investigations. I might lose everything. We might. We will lose everything. Just talk to me. We can fix this. We can spin this. You're smart. You're the only one who understands how this works. Don't burn everything down." There it was again, I sat in the booth of a diner while listening to that message. The kind of place that smells like burnt coffee and 1980s vinyl. There was a half-eaten stack of pancakes in front of me, and a waitress named Jan who didn't judge when I asked for a 5th refill of black coffee. I replayed the message once. Then again. Spin this. Fix it. As if I was still part of her team. As if I'd been included in her strategy meetings while she whispered someone else's name into a hotel pillow. As if I was supposed to prop her up after she'd already replaced me with a sleeker version who couldn't even keep his own wife from turning state's witness. No, not this time. This time, I wasn't cleaning up after anyone. But that didn't mean I was done. I still had one more step. One more thread to pull before I walked away for good. The board of Delaney's company, the real decision-makers behind the polished brand and sleek launch parties, they didn't know me. But I knew them. I knew who they were, where they'd invested before, and most importantly, what kind of scandals they'd quietly buried to protect their bottom line. I spent the next 12 hours building a dossier, not on Zeke, but on her. Emails, contracts, duplicated assets that had been reimagined from smaller creators, licensing agreements they twisted just enough to legally survive lawsuits. Even a few questionable payout trails linked to a failed influencer collaboration from last year that mysteriously disappeared from the internet. Delaney had been careful, but not perfect. And I had everything. By midnight, I was sitting across from a woman named Tasha Corrigan, head of brand compliance for the holding company that owned Delaney's firm. We were in a neutral space, a high-rise business suite she arranged after I emailed her anonymously with a simple subject line. "If you want to avoid a class action lawsuit, meet me quietly. Tonight." She was exactly what I expected. Polished. Razor-focused. No time for games. She looked at me like I was either an asset or a ticking bomb. "Why are you doing this?" she asked after I showed her the documents, transferring them from my encrypted drive to her laptop one by one. I didn't answer at first. I just watched her face tighten with each file. "Finally," I said, "because I was erased by people who thought I was forgettable, and I want them to remember exactly who they overlooked." She closed the laptop and folded her hands. "We'll take it from here." I stood, gathered my coat, and paused at the door. "One last thing," I said. "If Delaney says I'm unstable, she will, by the way, you might want to ask her what Zeke's wife has already filed with HR." Her eyes narrowed. A flicker of recognition. She knew. I walked out into the night feeling lighter than I had in years. Not victorious. Not proud. Just free. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like correction. Like restoring something that had been crooked for far too long. And for once, I wasn't the fool in the background anymore. I was the one pulling the final thread. I didn't expect the headlines. That morning, I woke up on the lumpy couch in a friend's spare office. The kind of friend who didn't ask questions when you text at 3 a.m. asking for a floor and a blanket. I opened my phone out of habit, expecting the usual mess, spam, a few missed calls, maybe another desperate text from Delaney. What I didn't expect was to see her name trending. Top creative executive under fire after allegations of fraud and misconduct. Anonymous whistleblower reveals disturbing practices in major fashion firm. Affair, lies, and a brand empire crumbling overnight. I sat up so fast I knocked over a half-empty coffee cup on the floor. The headline wasn't the most interesting part. It was the comment threads. People weren't just reading. They were digging. Screenshots were being analyzed. Audio snippets from the flash drive were floating around on private forums. Twitter was ablaze with half-accurate summaries from online drama sleuths. Reddit had 3 separate threads dissecting timelines, comparing lipstick colors and photos, trying to figure out when the affair started and who knew what and when. But the real twist? It wasn't just Zeke under fire anymore. It was her. Delaney was being named, not just as a participant in the scandal, but as a core architect of the brand's deception. They had found traces of her signatures on the misrepresented contracts, her initials in the metadata of the borrowed assets. And worst of all, someone had leaked a private Slack exchange between her and Zeke laughing about client baiting with data tweaks. That phrase alone was enough to send an army of legal departments into cardiac arrest, and it spread like a virus. By mid-afternoon, I received a call from a blocked number. I let it ring, then rang again. Eventually, I picked up. It was Delaney's lawyer, a soft-spoken woman named Deborah, who had the measured tone of someone trained to deal with disasters politely. "Mr. Ames," she began, "my client has asked me to reach out to you formally. There's concern that you may be in possession of materials that were not legally yours to distribute." I chuckled. "Your client used my laptop, my storage drive, and did so on a shared network we both agreed upon in our marital household. Want to test that in court?" She was quiet for a beat. My client would prefer this not become a legal battle. She should have thought about that before mocking me with her lover over unsecured Wi-Fi. Again, silence. Then she said, "Is there a number you'd consider for settlement?" I didn't respond. I just ended the call. That was the moment I understood something so clearly it felt like a bell ringing inside my chest. They still didn't understand what this was. They still thought it was about money, about ego, about a scorned husband looking for a payout. They didn't understand I'd already won. This wasn't about rebuilding what was lost. It was about refusing to be buried underneath it. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went back to our house. Not to talk, not to negotiate, but to gather the rest of my things, the pieces of me she hadn't bothered to discard yet. I wanted no trace of myself left in the place where I once dreamed of a quiet life with someone who wore my ring but shared her heart elsewhere. The neighborhood was quiet when I pulled into the driveway. The porch light was on, a small flicker of normalcy that almost felt laughable. Inside, it was dark, like she hadn't wanted to turn anything on since the story broke. She appeared from the kitchen, barefoot, in one of my old college sweatshirts like she'd forgotten it didn't belong to her anymore. "Thad," she whispered, stepping toward me. "Please." I held up a hand. "I'm just here for my stuff." She blinked quickly, eyes already misting over. "You don't have to do this." I set down an empty box on the hallway table and looked her straight in the eye. "Yes," I said. "I do." And I walked past her, not rushing, not shaking, just moving forward. Room by room, I took only what was mine. Books, some clothes, a few framed photos I didn't hate, my grandfather's old toolbox, my journals. She followed me, but didn't speak again. I think she knew. Words couldn't fix this. When I came back down, she was standing by the front door. "There's nothing left of us?" she asked, voice barely audible. I paused with my hand on the knob. "There's nothing left that wasn't a lie," I replied. And then, without drama, I opened the door and left. She didn't follow. The air outside felt different. Cooler. Sharper. Like it belonged to someone else now, someone new. Someone free. I got into my car, placed the last box in the passenger seat, and pulled away from the house I once thought would be forever. It took 12 years to build that life. It took one silent decision to end it. But it wasn't destruction. It was a reset. And I wasn't looking back. 3 months later, I woke up to sunlight cutting across my face through tall windows I never used to have. My new apartment sat on the edge of the city, not far enough to feel isolated, but just enough to hear birds instead of sirens in the morning. The place wasn't fancy. Nothing like the polished, magazine-ready condo Delaney once dreamed of dragging me into. But it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every book on the shelf, every weird, mismatched mug in the cabinet, chosen by me, for me. The silence here wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I had spent the first few weeks after everything fell apart rebuilding myself slowly, not dramatically, not with some self-help manifesto or gym membership. Just small steps. Waking up early. Cooking real meals. Going for walks in the evening instead of doom-scrolling alone in the dark. And the best part? No one was walking around behind me asking why I wasn't ambitious enough. No one was comparing me to men I'd never be. No one was pretending I was enough in public and discarding me in private. I hadn't seen Delaney since the night I packed my things. The scandal came and went, as scandals do, but the fallout was real. Zeke was fired within a week. His wife filed for divorce and took their child with her to Oregon. Delaney was asked to step away indefinitely from the brand she once helped build. Last I heard, she was consulting somewhere in Europe. Quietly, without fanfare, trying to reassemble a career that no longer wanted her. She sent me one final message about a month after I left. I hope you find what you're looking for. I'm sorry, I didn't value it when you gave it to me freely. I didn't respond. Because by then, I had already started finding it. In small moments. In unexpected people. In myself. One evening, as I was walking home from a bookstore, I bumped into someone, literally, outside the coffee shop on 9th. She dropped her notebook. I bent down to hand it back, and we both laughed at how clumsy we were. Her name was Sienna. She was quiet, thoughtful, asked questions that didn't feel rehearsed. We talked. Once. Then again. Then again. It's too early to call it anything. But she listens. She sees people. She smiles with her whole face. I told her I was divorced. She didn't flinch. I told her I'd been hurt. She didn't try to fix it, just nodded and said, "That makes sense." It's strange how healing doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It feels like the absence of noise. The absence of tension. The quiet assurance that you're not shrinking yourself to fit someone else's version of love. The last journal entry I wrote before the fallout read, "I think I'm disappearing and no one's noticing." Today, I wrote something different. I've never been more visible, and it's enough that I see me. I'm not perfect. I'm not fearless. I still flinch at certain songs, certain smells, certain street corners where we once shared a joke that meant everything and now means nothing. But I'm whole. Not because someone else made me that way, but because I stopped letting someone else take pieces I couldn't afford to lose. So to anyone reading this, wondering if it gets better, it does. Not all at once. Not in a movie scene climax. But in quiet mornings. In soft friendships. In laughter that doesn't feel forced. In love that doesn't feel earned like a trophy, but offered like a warm cup of coffee. I'm still here.